And here we are, data day. So today we're going to talk about the beef patch. We're going to talk about exits, and we're going to talk about a few other things that I think are going to really surprise you. So I forgot what the third one was that we're talking about, Dean, but I know you're going to remember. So
daylight saving.
Daylight savings. That's right. That's right.
Oh,
It's actually, we're getting some really awesome weather here.
Let it come down.
Walk more, and it's like all of a sudden people are coming out of the hibernation sequence. And I'm actually really looking forward to daylight savings this year, so I can get out earlier with the PUPPIESs for a WALK, if you know what I mean, right? Just so we don't get any action going on here, boys. But because we have skunks and stuff that are out before light, right? So it's I typically wait until it's light to go, because I've actually encountered them coming around a corner and the two of them are like staring each other down. I'm thinking, this ain't gonna end well for me this morning. You know what I mean? So we stopped walking in the dark. Well, nighttime, but we stopped walking in the dark in the morning.
Yeah,
so, gentlemen.
You know what? I think this is the last daylight savings time that we're going to see here in the States. I think they're going to be abolishing it. I mean, they've been pushing that. They've been pushing that for a long, long time.
There's some states that don't do it, isn't it? Isn't there?
I think so, but I forgot which ones they were.
It's Hawaii and Arizona and the territories.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay.
And the Sunshine Protection. Are we alive? Yeah, we are.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
So the Sunshine Protection Act was pushed through by.
Were you about to curse? You were about to give something that nobody.
No.
Yeah, he's just trying to cover his ass. That's all. I mean,
I want to save all the good stuff for the show.
Yes, exactly. Yes,
exactly.
So the Marco Rubio put forward the Sunshine Protection Act last March, which was to essentially lock in. There would be no changes to time in spring and fall. So eliminate the changing of clocks. I had a look on the government website yesterday. It's been no change. It's had 2 readings by the Senate, and it's been referred to the Committee on Commerce, Science and Transportation. So it hasn't gone anywhere in a year, but there is a push towards it. I think most people would prefer it not to change, to have it locked in at a set time, because it is quite hard on the body, particularly next week when we lose an hour's sleep. Worse,
well,
because a lot of people.
Dean, because we got 3 things to talk about. I remember when I first met you, one of the slides you pulled up was a slide on daylight savings time,
Right.
and the opposite, about how losing that hour's sleep equates to an astronomical amount of accidents coming that week.
Yeah, it's not so much. I mean, people lose an hour's sleep, so it's a pretty big deal for a lot of people that haven't adjusted their body clocks this week, because the key is to go to bed earlier this week to set your body clock to the new time zone. So that's one way to do it. But if you don't do that, losing that hour's sleep and still having to get up to go to work next Sunday, it takes a few days to acclimate to the new time zone. The problem is, though, Dan, that people are commuting to work in the dark on Monday. So you've got truckers doing deliveries, you've got people riding to work, walking to work, driving to work in the dark, pedestrians on crosswalks where trucks are trying to navigate, school kids going to school in the dark. So that's where the real risk is that suddenly now we're doing a lot more things in the dark than we used to. On the flip side, we've now got more light in the evening, which means less sleep. So we start soon the 100 deadly days of summer. We're not there yet, but more sunlight means less sleep, paradoxically, because you go to bed later, because the setting of the sun is what triggers the sleep-wake cycle. So you go to sleep when the sun goes down. If the sun goes down later in the evening and you get up to 15 hours of sunlight in a day, people sleep less. So we're heading into that crazy time of the year. But this weekend is daylight saving, and that's what you've got to, I think, start preparing for now.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you have any stats about kind of the increased amount of accidents and that kind of stuff the week of daylight savings time?
Not on hand.
Okay.
I can recall a 6% increase in accidents. Motor vehicle accidents is one number that was touted. There's been a lot of studies done on it, but there is an increase in accidents for sure. It also
I've
helps.
always said I hated driving to work in the dark. Like you drive in the dark all winter to and from work, all winter in the dark. If you're not, obviously working from a home office or something. And I can remember so many days just feeling so gloomy on the way home because it's like I spent all of these wonderful hours of sunshine. Now, whether it be full of snow or not, the sun was out. And I spent it in like cooped up in an office. You know what I mean? And I had one of those great offices with no windows tucked into the corner because that's the way I wanted it.
Right.
And I remember just feeling down, feeling where I said, I got to get out at lunch. And even if it's just get outside and just stand there and stare at the sun for 5 minutes and just collect. Because the other day when it was beautiful, I was out on my back deck.
Yeah.
The old lawn chair, the old fire chair for the campfires, and just sat on the back deck. It was like one of the best things I've done in a long time. Just sit there and go, and just take in the sun.
Oh yeah.
It's I was watching a movie or a series, True Detective, with Jodie Foster over the weekend, and it was set up in Alaska, up near the I'm going to say it's a copper or gold mine up in not Red Deer. It's right up in the top above the Arctic Circle. And
frozen ground or something and
it was set. It was about the night country, but it really started. All the craziness started. How did I make it? It really started with I think they call it a month of nights or something about the night country where there's perpetual darkness.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's the problem that you've got up in that part of the world is seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, which is lack of sunlight causes all of the symptoms of depression. I can't imagine how hard it is on mine workers up there to have no sunlight. So yeah. Good series, by the way.
You'd have to almost simulate sunlight somehow.
So,
you know what I mean?
So Dan, that's a good question, because my wife said, how do they adjust? And I said, well, on the set here, that was actually filmed in Iceland, but it was based on being in the Arctic Circle in Alaska. But in the set, they didn't have any blue light therapy. One of the things you do to simulate lights are blue light boxes. And the flip side is if you're a shift worker and you've got 18 hours of sunlight, when you go home after your shift and you've got to sleep at night, you shut off all forms of light, including blue blocker glasses to block the blue light, which is a certain number of nanometers in the light spectrum. The flip side is when you've got less sunlight, you can have blue light added to the room to actually simulate sunlight. But in the movie, they didn't have any of that. It was just regular fluorescent lights in the ceiling. So it wouldn't be enough to help reset the body clock or to stimulate sleep, light and dark, and the sleep-wake cycle.
And their monthly electric
show, right,
charges
Dean?
are out through the wall, man.
Right.
No, you mean the show, right, Dean? The True Detective show?
Yeah, that was.
Okay, because you said movie. I'm thinking, what movie did I miss? But yeah, okay.
So if you're going to do it properly, that's what you would have had in the movie set. So they didn't call me, so I didn't. They goofed.
Well, that's only Hollywood. I mean, so I got a question for you, and this 6% that's going to equate to a ton of accidents. People goofing, not just truck drivers, but everybody on the road. So now you got to be even more awake and apparent as to what's going on. With the amount of trucks on the road, any type of numbers, like 6% equates to how many thousand next week that they're expecting?
Good question. I don't know the exact number. I just know that the stat is there's the increased risk of being in a fatal accident is 6% higher next week. So I don't know the actual number. I'd have to go back and look at the research papers, Dan, to find the quantity. But it's measurable, so you don't see that change on any other day of the year. You're like, so your day of week normally has an effect, but because of there's a statistical impact.
Yeah, and I'm going to say no to this answer. Robert. Rob, I'm telling you, since I've known Dean, I've thrown, and Dean will vouch for this, I've thrown some like way off the wall questions out there. And Dean's like, actually, get the fuck out of here. You know that? Like, I think you remind me of Mike Ross from Suits, who has this photographic memory, and it's like anything he reads or you say to him, he can recall. And you know, I mean, that's obviously, Dean, that's what makes you awesome at what you do, is that memory. But yeah, you are a mountain of knowledge, my friend.
Thank you, Robert.
Rob, no.
I hate to disappoint you, but I
yeah, I'm gonna say, well, I mean, listen, Dean probably doesn't know a lot about snowmobiling, so I'm gonna say there's maybe one thing where I can help Dean out, but other than that, no.
That's what we try to do on this show there, Robert, is we try to stump Dean.
Yeah.
What do you mean you don't know Dean?
Stumping Dean Day. Yes, instead of Daddy Day. Yeah.
The phenomenon though is that I have no recollection of movies I've watched. I could watch a movie last night and I have zero recollection, and my wife will say, "Well, we watched it last night," and I say, "Well, no, we haven't." So I can watch a movie over and over and over again and have no recollection I've watched it before. And
it's not important to you. That's why it's not important to you. You know, that's why it has to do with trucking and data and all that. I mean, that's the livelihood.
There's no room for movies at that point. Yeah. But don't beat yourself up about it. My wife and I have watched movies, and halfway through we're like, I think we've seen this before. All the time, man. All the time. Shows. It's like, did we watch this series? And then it's like you're looking at we've been, you know, half hour, 45 minutes into a movie, and it's like, we've seen this. This is now coming to me. It's making sense. Yeah, so it's all good. It's all good.
So is that a good segue to talk about the freight market movie we're all watching?
Yes, I was actually just about to say that's a pretty good transition into what we're going to talk about next, Dean. Hit us with it, because I was actually really surprised to get your email about what was originally this third topic, now becoming the second topic of what the market's doing.
Yeah, it's I don't know that we're surprised about how, you know, the market has dropped off in February into the start of March. That's a fairly normal seasonal pattern. Rates are down for dry van and reefer. We've still got an excess of capacity. Demand is still very soft. I think the biggest story is we've still got a lot of capacity that the market is still trying to adjust to, both large fleet, small fleet. Yep. You know, some of the big things that drive ton miles, like manufacturing, are down about 1% year over year. You know, steel, lumber, machinery, they're all down year over year. So we're not seeing that bump in volume we'd normally see in a strong market. February's been a little bit more lackluster than what we thought. When you look at the comparisons, the freezing cold in the middle of January drove rates up, and then they've come back down. So it kind of looks like they've fallen even faster. But when you draw a straight line from day one to where we are now, it's a fairly normal seasonal slide in spot rates. But capacity is I'll use the word modulating. I've used it before on the show for dry van in particular. I think reefer, it's a little bit less. There's a little bit less fluctuation, and in flatbed even less, because those volumes are going up and rates are going up in flatbed, because we're in planting, harvesting season, machinery season, building season. We're putting fire hydrants in the ground because we had a warmer winter in the northeast. We've got, I noticed on the weekend, flatbed after flatbed loaded with garden mulch going to Lowe's and Home Depot parking lots, or as we say in Australia, car parks, which I think someone questioned before. So you see, so here's what I'm seeing: a lot more flatbed volume moving earlier in the season than we would because of a warmer winter here. My ground has not frozen here in New England, which means that we've had a much warmer winter. So that's good news for flatbed carriers. We're seeing a bit of seasonality there. Flatbed, though, Dan, to your question about the beef patch and the lowest cattle inventory in 73 years. So, you know, we know that produce volumes are down because of the wet weather in Florida, in California. Those volumes were still off about 20%, give or take, in terms of the number of truckloads of produce moving. But we've got a lot less beef moving also because those volumes are down. Specifically in that part of the country, the beef patch was kind of up the Midwest part of the country. Truckload volumes, I looked at the number of refrigerated truckloads of beef in particular out of that area. It's down about 14% since the 20-year record high. Now, to be clear, I can't tell you that it's frozen beef precisely, but when I look at where they come from, I can, you know, connect the dots. So refrigerated volume in the Midwest is down about 14% from where it was in March of 2022 when it was at a peak. That's about 7,400 fewer truckloads of refrigerated freight out of the Midwest. The cattle head count is way down. Domestic beef production, in terms of the number of tons, is about 3% lower last January compared to January of 2023. But the interesting thing is, and I picked up on this while I was in Australia, imports are about 10% higher. Imports of beef are about the highest in 30 years. And most of that comes from Australia, where, you know, my own family is involved in live cattle export and frozen beef export of, you know, frozen beef from the meatworks. So what that means is you've got less volume coming from what you would traditionally call the beef patch and more coming from ports, where imports come in, where you've got refrigerated containers moving. So that's sort of a little bit of a shift. Some of the big states like Texas, Missouri, Nebraska, the reefer loads in those states are about 3% lower year over year, down about 2% last week. So, you know, we're seeing more imports. I think that's important for anybody that's in the reefer space, looking at the, you know, traditional refrigerated volumes for beef in particular. I haven't looked at poultry or pork just yet. I've got to do that this week. But if you think about
what the reason is for this,
because
are they relating it back to any reason, or?
Yeah, drought and higher feed costs. So the two are the primary reasons. So a lot of people got rid of a lot of their cattle inventory. And of course, it takes a long time to restock that inventory. You know, we had a big drought. I think it was 2015. There was a massive drought in the meat patch area, and imports surged to counter for the loss of production domestically. It takes a long time to build that herd back up for, you know, for the, like in particular in the feedlots and in the other growing regions. So that's the primary reason, Dan.
So something that happened like 9 years ago?
Well, that was just an example. It took time after that drought to restock the national herd, but because of high input costs of farming, labor, fertilizer, stock feed, and sort of drought conditions, it's not just like it's you know, once the ground dries out, we can sow more strawberries. It takes a long time to grow those that stock that comes into feedlots or
that makes sense.
Ultimately ends up in meatworks. And it's an incredible number. Like you think about some of the big production plants that process, you know, 400 truckloads of beef a day. Like some of these big meat plants in Kansas City and Missouri are just staggering in terms of the volume of beef that we consume. So anyway, the reason I did this piece was I was just saying, well, why are refrigerated volumes soft in February, early March? Well, part of it is produce season's sort of very lackluster, but also when you look at some of the other products we haul a lot of, you know, proteins, those volumes are down also. And I think we're all changing our, you know, consumers are changing our buying patterns. I think we may be buying less, doing less, you know, maybe changing the type of meals that we're cooking. So I'm kind of, you know, spitballing here around what the consumers are doing, but I suspect overall demand is down because consumers have changed their buying patterns as it relates to beef consumption.
I can see that. I know our family has slowed down on beef consumption.
Yep.
Trying to eat more fish, trying to eat more chicken, more salads, like salads with tuna on it and that kind of stuff. Just, you know, there's a ton of research out there about the impacts of red meat on your body and eating too much of it. And I know, especially Robert from Texas, he's going to be like, what the fuck? but it's, you know, it's true. And, you know, not to mention the cost is astronomical. You know, it used to be, I remember clear as day, we would go get like 2-inch thick T-bone steaks every time we had people over, and we'd be barbecuing those bad boys up. And now they're like $45 a steak, and I like my friends, but I don't like them that much. I'll be honest with you. And you know what I mean? And so Robert says, Dean, we got to get you on the Logistics Lounge. Shameless plug. Look at this guy. He's just coming on. He's coming in strong today. He's on fire.
He is on fire.
All right, so let's dive into the last part of it that we wanted to talk about, Dean. And or I guess we kind of did touch on it, but not in a heavy sense. We don't have as many carriers leaving the market. I would have thought February would have been the month, because, you know, they went through December, they went through January, and it's like all of February, and they're like, you know what? And maybe March is the month, but I would have thought they would have been like, you know what? This is crazy. I'm done.
Well, so January of 2023 was the peak in the number of carriers revoking their authority. So to be clear, these are interstate long-haul carriers. Most, we know 83% of them are in the spot market because we track the DOT numbers onto DOT's network. So the 5% of the market that change their operating status each month are what move the spot market needle. Because if 83% of the carriers coming and going are in the spot market, and the spot market's only 15% of all loads, it moves the capacity level a lot more in the spot market compared to the contract market. So I track because when you look at total capacity, it's always increasing. It's very hard to get a sense of what's moving in and out. And this chart that we've got, Dan, just shows, and we've shown it on the show before, the black line is the difference between the red and the two greens. The red are carriers revoking their authority. The greens are new carrier authorities in dark green and reactivated authorities. So you can see there in January, we had 9,700, this month, 8,800. So roughly, 1,100 fewer carriers exited this month. You can see that black line starting to turn up on the right of the chart. Yep. You can see the massive spike during the pandemic. So it means that we're starting to see, I think this, so 1 month doesn't make a trend. Absolutely, I get that. But we've been waiting for this transition from losing, 2,500 carriers net a month in the long haul spot sector to, getting back towards where it is traditionally longer term, where you're kind of constantly adding capacity, which means that black line is above zero. So we're not there yet. The net loss was 1,400 carriers. Last month, we lost 2,500 carriers. And if we go back to 2023, January was the worst month for carrier exits. And I can't think of the exact number, but if I have a quick look at it here, I can see it was closer to 15,000 that left last January. So last January was much worse, Dan. And I was waiting for this to sort of continue on. But at some point, if we look at last January we lost 14,000. So last January, we lost 14,000. This January, we lost 9,700. So you can see that a lot of the exodus of capacity certainly was last year. If this trend continues, it means that the exodus of capacity is starting to slow down, which means that the balance between supply and demand will start to get closer together at some point. The other side of this is diesel prices, are predicted to stay around $3.90 to $4 all year, based on EIA forecast. A lot of carriers are getting by with diesel at that level and rates where they are. They're not making a lot of profit. It's a really hard road for a lot of them, and but they're hanging in there. And I think that's what the market is waiting for, is the market to turn. I certainly know shippers are thinking about that. They're waiting for the market to turn, and slightly concerned about less capacity when it does turn, assuming it does turn this year. So yes, capacity is exiting, and both large and small fleets. We talked about a couple of weeks ago, the large truckload carrier index that the Journal of Commerce push out. They've had 4 successive quarters of the number of large public fleet truck counts decreasing back to 2018 levels. So that's where we're still sitting in the market, where capacity is still exiting. And it kind of feels like where we sit right now, that we're at the sort of that ebb in the tide, right, where the exodus has slowed right down, and we may have seen the worst of it in terms of carriers leaving the industry.
It'll be interesting to see what the next 30, 60 days holds, because this is typically where the market starts turning, right? And with everything going on with produce markets and everything, because I also see a lot of this excess in the spot market or the dry van market, the FAK market, is because a lot of reefer carriers, I mean, I've been asked many times, can we load reefers? We got a ton of reefers available, just because they're not doing produce or as much of it as they were.
Right, exactly.
So, putting it vented, can it load on a reefer? Can it load on a reefer? And it's, being able to redirect. I'm having conversations with shippers every day about, I understand you right now, your capacity is like, you got tons of capacity, but what happens? And it's just my approach. The conversation is, what happens when those people you're using need to shift triangles because there's just not enough revenue.
Right.
Right.
So,
and it's a great conversation because I honestly think every shipper, this is one thing COVID did, is it showed shippers they're volatile.
Yeah.
They don't have their suppliers airtight, and also understanding what lanes make their suppliers money. How are they getting to the areas, specifically,
right.
Well, I guess anywhere really. If your carrier is in a backhaul position hauling your freight, well, what is your customer like? What's the volatility of your customer to get you here?
Right.
And I think it's a conversation everyone needs to start having. Even as a broker, you have to start having it with your carriers.
Yeah.
You're doing this lane. We have a customer who's shut down for a bit due to stock and a lot of different issues. And now they're starting to gear back up. And the conversation last week was, okay, we're starting to gear up.
Yep.
What are the rates?
Yep.
What is your availability? How sustainable is that availability? Because they're already looking and saying, like, we're going from 0 to ramping up to 30, 40 loads a week.
Right.
We need to know we're covered and we're not going to be paying, instead of 1,800, 2,500 to source trucks. Right. And, going back to my team and the conversation, it's been, okay, what type of volume do we have? What is the, legitimacy of the volume long term? And it's a real conversation.
So Dan, the other data point. So remember, this is DAT's contract shipper world. It's about 70 billion in annual freight spend on the contract side of the market, not spot, not low post, but contract active rates. So the latest data for the last 2 weeks of February compared to the first 2 weeks of February, carriers decreased their rates about 3.2% compared to prior RFP rates negotiated last year. The previous 2 weeks, it was 7.3%. So the rate of decrease is slowing. We're still in single digit territory. Reefer rates are down about 2.4%. So incumbent carriers are still decreasing contract rates for RFPs, but at a decreasing rate, if that makes any sense at all.
Sure.
What we're waiting for is to your point, Dan, when capacity starts to tighten and demand increases, you will see RFP rates go into the positive. And I think that's what shippers are trying to navigate, is how much do we keep driving rates down and capacity out, such that we don't end up being caught short with capacity and then a surge in rates.
Yes. Now, when you're talking about the 7% or 7.3% or 2% at the beginning of the month and then 3%, so we're just so I'm clear, and maybe anyone else caught that, we're talking over 10% in the month of February.
No, so these are 2 week over 2 week rates.
Oh, got it. Okay.
So if you looked at the first 2 weeks of February versus the last 2 weeks of January, they dropped 7.3%, which was just after the polar vortex freeze. Okay. But if you split February in half, first 2 weeks, last 2 weeks, in the last 2 weeks, rates dropped 3.2%. So they didn't drop as much. So these are 2 week over 2 week rates, and what they're looking at is the rate of change of replacement rates that come into a routing guide on a lane for the very first time, replacing a rate that was used 1,000 times over in the last year for contract rates. Yeah,
That
makes sense.
What we're looking for is that 3.2 to get closer to 0 and then turn up again. So that would tell you that discussions between shippers and carriers are saying, hey, we've got the volume, you've got just enough trucks, we need to start, and carriers will start saying we need more money at some point. I think that's
Awesome. Jeff, you were quiet today, buddy. You okay?
I'm just listening.
Oh, okay. It was actually, you know what, Dean, what you shared was actually really interesting, and I think if everyone's paying attention every week, and Jeff could probably vouch for this as well, it really starts to paint a picture, eh, Jeff? Like it really starts to give you an overall scenic view, if I can call it that, because I know it's not really a scenic view for a lot of brokers, but a scenic view of the industry and kind of you go back week to week and you just kind of think about the things that are talked about, and you can start to see the pattern. I love this.
Yeah. Hey, Dane, Donner's Pass.
Yeah.
Have you got any updates on that? Because, I mean, they closed it down. And then you probably saw the same thing. I mean, 3, 4, 5 feet on 80. You got emergency crews out there evacuating guys in their trucks. Now, the first thing that came to mind was, so they leave all the trucks out there unattended.
Yeah.
They're getting people off the roads.
Yeah.
Boy, what a great opportunity for a snowmobiler to go out there knowing that out there and steal stuff.
Yeah.
I wonder if it happens. Because, I mean, they can get out of there really, really quick. And what are they going to do? Think about that.
That's a good question. Yeah, I left there on the Wednesday before the storm, left Truckee, and the day I left, the blizzard started. They shut that down. They shut I-80 at Truckee down. In fact, on the Nevada-California border, they shut it down at 6 p.m. Pacific Friday night. It didn't open until midday Monday. And, of course, Jeff, there are a lot of trucks just blocked by snowdrift. So it wasn't so much even though they had a lot of feet of snow, it was the wind that was pushing a lot of snow everywhere.
190 mile an hour gusts.
Yeah, at the top of
think about that.
Yeah.
That's
huge.
That's beyond, what is that, an F6? I mean, seriously, I think F5 is what, 150? I mean,
reefer rates jump.
Yeah.
Reefer rates jumped 16 cents a mile in outbound California because of it. Last week, you have capacity just tightens dramatically when those trucks can't move, because that I-80 is about 400 trucks an hour. But yes, Robert, I've sat there and done the math. Sat there on Vista Point, halfway down Donner Pass, and counted.
That's why he doesn't want to talk about it.
It's a beautiful spot to get a lot of content for my Instagram page. Is because what I'm fascinated with at Vista Point eastbound down Donner Pass, it's only like a 2 or 3 mile run, but halfway down, the number of rookie drivers that have their trailer brakes on fire is staggering. It takes a lot of work to set your brakes on fire in like 1.5 miles downhill. That takes a lot of doing after a 40-mile incline down to Sacramento to the top of Donner Pass.
So what are we looking at as far as degradation in service when these kind of one-off, I mean, let's call it a one-off. I mean, they don't get this kind of snowfall for 3 days straight. At least I don't remember when that happened. So what kind of degradation in service are you looking at from your point of view? Because you've been on top of the mountain, below, above, whatever.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
So luckily, if you're pulling out of, say, Salinas or anywhere out of the Central Valley, it's another. If you were going to Chicago, so say if you said Stockton to Chicago via I-80 or via I-40 onto 15 to Salt Lake City to bypass it, adds another 2 hours, 2.5 hours. So luckily, a lot of the smart carriers would have just ran straight down 5 across 40 up onto 15 and back at Salt Lake City 3 hours longer than it would have been. So it's one of those unique parts of the country. Unlike Road Check Week that's coming up in May 15, there's only 2 roads out of that state, and you're going to get caught on either one for sure. But yes, a big degradation in capacity. Roads are open. Even though there were spin outs, Jeff, on Monday night outside of the chain up area. So they were still spinning. Big trucks were still spinning out because they didn't have chains on. Just it was a mess, a real mess.
The entire weather patterns this year have been just astronomically screwed. So all right, gentlemen. Well, thank you very much for being here again, my 2 favorite gents. What do we got? What are we going to be looking at next week, Dean?
I'm getting ready for Mid-America Truck Show. I'm deep into painting, polishing, cleaning up the truck, getting ready for that week-long trip week-long truck show. We've got Cody Kohler's on our show next week. He's our resident trucking expert in the produce market from Phoenix, Arizona. They do a lot of freight off the West Coast. So we have him on in March each year to talk about what the produce season looks like on the West Coast. That's a really important data point we're looking for from him.
I can't wait for you to bring that info to us on Wednesday and put it in. Jeff, what do you got going?
Yeah, well, got another podcast in the Storytelling Chronicles, Empowering Women into Logistics with Christy Knichel. Our guest is Ramel Watley from Truck and Hustle.
Oh yeah.
So we're gonna be talking about, you know, women truckers, Freight Fest, of course, Truck and Hustle. So yeah, tune in. We're live every single Monday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's always a good time there. So
Yeah.
Awesome. Gents, we will chat soon, my man.
Yep.
Everybody
Awesome,
have
man.
yourselves
Enjoy your
a
rest of your week.
Yeah.
fantastic
Thank you.
day.
See you guys.